Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Cafecito. I'm your host, Christiana. Very excited to have you all join us for our third season. We are looking forward to connecting with you all, not just on video, but in audio form. We have launched our podcast version of The Cafecito, and you can check us out on all channels that carry podcasts, and we'll put links below if you are on YouTube or on your favorite podcast channel so that you can connect with us directly. Shout out to our sponsor, We The Plug. We The Plug is an organization that focuses on early stage founders who are interested in starting their own business. So they may be in the ideation stage, and we walk with them through that stage all the way to their first customer, or if they're looking to raise funding. If that is something that piques your interest, do reach out to us at We The Plug, that's THA, not THE.com. So, you guys, we have another phenomenal guest today. And when we met, I immediately thought to myself, we have to connect on The Cafecito, because hearing her journey just in the short span of time that we were speaking over the phone, it shook me to the core, because it caused me to think back over times where I could have used resources like this when I was in my early stage. But also, I think it is rewarding to see how someone can move from that idea stage to manifesting something so tangible. So I am excited to have Esa with us today. Welcome to The Cafecito.
Hello, hello. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to talk to you and just have a really great discussion around wherever this conversation takes us.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I am also making sure that we have something to drink with us on The Cafecito. I have water. I'm also drinking a little bit of tea, because I feel like our weather is like fluctuating where I am. And so it's nice to have some tea.
Yes.
I don't know.
It's fluctuating everywhere. It's that time of the year where you just don't know what season it is, but you're just glad that it's still relatively warm.
This is so true. I feel like it's usually in the spring where you dress for the winter, and by midday you're pulling off and derobing, and now it's summertime. Yep. For you. But I live in San Diego, and so the weather is pretty moderate, but it can fluctuate, and that's what we're experiencing right now. But anyway, I'm excited to have you here. And like I was saying earlier, that I look forward in learning a bit more about your journey. So why don't you tell the people who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm Esi Kagale Agyeman Gillo. I'm co-founder of DIFFvelopment. DIFFvelopment is a nonprofit organization. We have a global mission, but we're based in Montclair, New Jersey. Our mission is re-empowering the global Black community through historically driven re-education that empowers aspiring Black visionaries to develop their world differently. And that mission was really born out of our own experiences of realizing that you can have all the bells and whistles, go to the top schools, have supportive parents, educated parents, or not, but you're still going to face certain barriers as a Black person that you need to really be aware of, that go beyond maybe what the eye can see, and go beyond the common conversations that you may hear in everyday current events, and one of those things being just like the process of trying to find a job, trying to get your career going after you graduate, and how difficult that can be as a Black person, and not experiencing the same level of challenge as your peers. And this can be really scary when you're just trying to figure things out and you feel like you did everything right and you're not understanding why you're not getting the reception that you should. And meanwhile, you're brilliant, you're bright, you have ideas, you want to change the world, but you can't even get your foot in the door to get started. So, that was kind of what drove us to create this organization, to bridge that gap, understanding historically why those gaps exist, because we know generally, but we can also be very detached from the depths of that history and how it still resonates with us today. And if you don't know that, you're always going to be upset. It's important for you to understand why it's happening. But then also, it's also important for you to understand what your options are. And, sometimes we get so caught up with the traditional workplace model that we think we should be in, and we waste a lot of time, honestly, and energy and emotions around trying to get into those spaces when everything we need is in us to create the future that we want. We forget that nothing is easy. Even having a job is not easy. You got to keep that job, and so we're really passionate about making young people aware of their options, making them aware of their history and how they can leverage all of that to build a really solid future, not only for themselves, but for the next generation and for our community. So that's development in a nutshell.
That is a huge undertaking, I think, as well, because what you're talking about is breaking down, well, let me not even just say breaking down, it's a paradigm shift. So it's like a shift in the mindset. Before you are in a position to dismantle it, you have to be willing to receive, to start to shift your mindset on what you've been taught, because all of us have been ingrained in, I call them the well-intended, right? Those that have come before us have understood how the lay of the land works to survive. Because one of the things that I had another guest, he's a psychotherapist that deals with trauma from a Pan-African ideology perspective. And one of the things that he was talking about when he was working with clients, as he's working with clients, is that we are always in this like hyper sensitive, like hyper tension. We're always on, especially if we grew up in communities where we had to stay on alert. So we are operating out of this fight or flight, or this self-preservation, because that is what is required of us and have been required of us for generations. And so what I hear you talking about is, like I said before, helping people do a paradigm shift to understand that options are available to them. They just need to know where to start. And then you guys are the driver in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you talked about paradigm shift, because I think that's a huge part. It's like a unspoken precursor of some aspects of our work, especially in some cases, we're there to help facilitate the paradigm shift. In other cases, it already kind of needs to be in motion for the person to even receive what we're facilitating. But yeah, I really like that term that you use that to describe the work, because I think that's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, I totally see that. So, growing up, you had a certain vision of what you wanted to do with your life and what you wanted to build. Was this something that was always kind of at the back of your mind, of kind of pushing back against the establishment or the institution that was created to kind of lay out how your life should be because you check the box or are in these categories? Is this something that has always been a push for you, or is it something more recent? And if so, how did you take that and then start breaking down what it was actually going to look like?
I love that question. So, all right, where to begin? I always wanted to be a psychologist. So when people
Really?
I was like I was like that random kid next to the Jewish kid who's like, I want to be a stockbroker, and we're like 10. And I'm like, I want to be a psychologist, and everyone else is like veterinarian, some more usual things that a 10-year-old or 11-year-old would say. But I always wanted to be a psychologist because growing up, people would come to me with their problems. Old, young, like family, friends, and they'll be like, I don't know why I'm talking to you. You're only 10, but you're really wise, and I think you can help me out. And so it
Yeah.
was a running theme. And also just growing up in a traditional African household where I would see my parents were divorced, but seeing them do the same things in terms of like helping family members. Like everything was a collective effort. Oh, these people are having problems with their marriage, so they're coming over tomorrow. Don't disturb us. We're going to be sitting down with them to try to mediate all day. Or I'd see them flying somewhere to help out with somebody's kid or one of my cousins. So that kind of collective effort to uplift was always a big part of my upbringing, just from a cultural standpoint. And then my dad is a Pan-Africanist. And so he's a political scientist by training, Pan-Africanist by choice. And, you know, I grew up in a house where I was always hearing about Kwame Nkrumah and you name it, all day, every day, 24 hours a day, and where we need to be as a people, how we've fallen, how we need to get up, the different ways in which people before us have tried, why they failed, some of the options that we should be thinking about. So that was just part of my upbringing. So it's kind of like me always thinking like, oh, I'm going to do psychology, but I also had this very strong connection to my Blackness and what that meant, but not quite sure what I would do with it. I mean, when I was in undergrad, I went to Smith College. I studied Afro-Am and psychology, and then I did a certification in African studies, and I did my study abroad in the two places where I'm from, Uganda and Ghana. And so I was there for a year, and I got to see what life would be like for me living there. Made a decision at a very young age, like I'm going to live here for sure. This is where I want to be, but not quite sure, do I still really want to go all the way with psychology? And I wasn't attracted to the concept of having to get a PhD. My dad was like, it's not all it's cracked up to be. You don't need to do that. And I'm like, easy for you to say you have one, but it's funny because I do the same thing with the masters now. Like, I'm always like, you don't really, you know, and I think we all do that to a certain extent because we just want people to know, like, you don't have to have that to be great. And so I knew I didn't want to go all the way with psychology in the way I would need to in order to get to the heights that I would want to go. So I said, you know what, let me continue my studies. I love studying Black people, the diaspora. I want to understand all aspects of them beyond what I see and what I touch. I also want to know the history and the inner workings, the politics behind our particular situations. I felt quite clear on the African-American experience and the African experience at large, but I wanted to understand more of what was going on with Africa from a colonial perspective. And so I went out to get my master's in African Studies from the University of Oxford in the UK. And I was at that point, I was still like, okay, maybe I'll do research. Like I started thinking about think tanks, and I want to add to the body of research around the African experience from a Black perspective, because a lot of the people who do that research don't look like us.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, and so that's kind of where reality hit, right? So I come out of school. I mean, at any given day, University of Oxford is the best school in the world.
Right.
And I could not get a job. Like, and this was the day before LinkedIn, you know, the days before LinkedIn. So they couldn't quite figure my name out. It is an Asante name, but they don't know that. Agyeman, it's like, is she Jewish? Like, they didn't know. So I'll come in and you could see that they're like, this is not what we're expecting. And she is not getting the job. Like, you could feel it. And I would be interviewed by people who are running African departments and they have a degree in like 10th century literature or like, I don't know, music or something random.
Yep.
Never been to Africa. The department is only covering like Nigeria, Kenya, and like all the places where they feel like the money is or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like so young and green. I'm like, oh, I know the whole continent. I can help you. I can add here. I could do this. And they're just looking at me like, you're not getting this job. And so after enough of that, and then seeing my other peers from Oxford get positions at the UN and pretty much wherever they wanted, and some of them getting positions, high positions, running things regarding Africa, and they study like Eastern Europe or something else. And being really, it was just a wake up call for me. I mean, we all know the disparities, but it's just different when you're actually going through it at such a high level, you know? And so my friends were like, you need to temp, like you gotta get a job. And so, and I saw a lot of my friends going through that. Like they went to like some of the best dance schools or wherever they went to school, and they're temping and doing all these odd jobs, but nobody was talking about it, like how this was a problem. And so I refused to temp. So I ended up going back to this juice bar that I worked at when I was 14. It was my first job. And so I went back there, and it was interesting to come in contact with people who maybe I went to high school with, who were like looking down on me. I'm like, you don't even know where I've been. I'm not ashamed of this job, but don't judge me because I'm making a juice right now or making a sandwich. So that was interesting. And that was my first job out of Oxford. And then I eventually ended up working at a small nonprofit. So I had done like nonprofit. I had been in nonprofits without intentionally wanting to be in nonprofits, you know, like one of the biggest volunteer jobs I did was with like, the American Cancer Society, because it was near my house. And then I was the like assistant to the executive secretariat for the Panifest in Ghana. So I worked with them for a summer. And then I did some like odd remote job with a nonprofit based in South Africa. So I kind of had this trajectory that I wasn't aware that I was building. And so I ended up at a small nonprofit in Newark, New Jersey. And in retrospect, it was a phenomenal experience in terms of shaping my skill set that I'm using today. But at the time, I just wasn't feeling it. You know, it was serving our population mainly, but the leadership was not, and I just didn't know what they were doing, to be honest. And it was just a bit frustrating. So I ended up leaving, and then I ended up temping, and I had to advocate for myself to be hired eventually when I saw a lot of other people getting hired after about 2 weeks, and I was there for almost 6 months. And then, so that was a larger nonprofit. So one that had been around for 40 years. They do something called the stock market game. It's called SIFMA Foundation. It's a lobbying firm, but their foundation arm. So I got to see what it was like to be at a startup nonprofit that didn't really know what it was doing, and seeing a nonprofit that has every single member firm in its pocket and is able to carry out all the programming that it wants. So, but within that space, even still, I saw the microaggressions, and that's a term I never used to use, but in retrospect, I'm like, oh, that's what was happening. That's the easiest way for me to sum it up without going into detail. And I was the only Black person on my team. And I just knew I like to be happy. The way I was raised was like, I don't know. My freedom is in my happiness. I need to be happy. I need to like what I do. And I didn't like it. I wasn't serving Black youth, and I wasn't about to be the person to help them serve Black youth. That's not what I'm here for. And I didn't take any joy in being the only Black person on my team. I didn't enjoy that. And I just was like restless, and I was getting the promotions and stuff, but honestly, only because I know I wasn't getting paid what I should have gotten paid in the beginning. So, you know, corporate is complicated. They try to make you feel special, but at the end of the day, you know that you're being shortchanged. And
they're getting more out of you for less.
Especially when you know your intelligence and what you're worth. So I was just biding my time. And then, it's a very long story, but long story short, my husband he didn't go through that underemployment situation that I went through right out of college. He kind of got lucky. He got hired by Rutgers for a special study that was called the Black Life Study. The principal investigator was Black. Like, he just got really lucky, and he loved it. He was running his own team, but it only lasted for about 2.5 years. And so when that was done, he was just like me. He was working UPS, he was working Olive Garden, and this is a man with a master's. And so I'm like, yeah, you see what I'm talking about, right? This stuff is real. And so I was tired of my corporate job, but I was still there, and we wanted to pay off our student loans.
Yeah.
So long story short, we both started ending up working at a small little Black-owned restaurant. And the woman had a big ambition. She wanted to franchise, she wanted to do all this stuff. And we were like, oh, like we can help you. And so he was working there full time, and I was kind of doing catering, but I was helping with a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was essentially putting together a 2 to 4 year plan for them. And we were essentially consulting for them without realizing it. And then it evolved into them wanting to start a nonprofit. They wanted to start an urban garden. And my husband was like, look, if you're going to write that 501c3, we might as well start our own nonprofit. I don't know where he came with that, because we always had a lot of entrepreneurial ideas. But so I'm taking you through this whole journey to let you know, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I knew that I was passionate about Black people, and I knew I was passionate about helping people, but I didn't know what that was going to transpire into. And then not being able to get the jobs I wanted to get didn't really help. So we put a lot of love into this restaurant because it was Black owned and they had a vision, and we wanted to see them carry it out. And so we're like, oh, okay, well, we can help you really establish this location while we, pay off our student loans for the next 2 years. And then we'll break off. Like, so we laid it all out, but it just seemed like we were taking on too much responsibility, and it was no longer serving us. But that experience gave us a light bulb idea, because we had come up with other ideas before, but either it wasn't serving the community or it was, and the idea was too big. But this was like, wouldn't it be dope if young Black people had the opportunity to consult for a business as a practical learning experience? Because there's no better way to learn about a business than to be in one and to be part of growing it. And so that's kind of how that started. And then we were like, yeah, but it has to be more than that. They got to learn their history too. And so this is kind of how we started developing the programming. And that's how our flagship program was born. And once the idea came, it was just like, get the domain name, get the phone, you start just getting all the stuff. And you're like, let's just start this. And I started the 1023 application for the 501c3 status. And it was kind of like, we're going to build our own job. We're going to create our own work that we're both passionate about. And so So yeah, that's kind of how it started.
You know what? I always say that, and for those of you all who are listening, there's always this why, and there's a book that is titled Start with Why. But I'm always curious about the why, because it's always tied to a problem that is being experienced by the person or someone close to them that they're trying to solve. And I appreciate you taking us through that journey, because as you were speaking, like, I was really invested in everything that you were saying, the whole story. But I also could relate at many different points throughout the journey. And I know you only gave us like the cliff notes and not even the full cliff notes. It was like a piece of the cliff notes. Yes. But I appreciate you in your transparency, because I think it's so important for those that are watching or listening to this to hear themselves in your journey, to identify that at any point you feel like you're not being honored and you're not honoring yourself. Give yourself permission to walk away. And sometimes that walking away is not immediate because there's obligations, but there should be a plan in place where you have an exit strategy. The other takeaway that I got from it is where you were speaking about giving opportunity, creating opportunity when one is not presented to you. Because we all are given this notion that you go to college, you get the degree, you get the job, voila. I graduated and 9/11 happened. And so it was like, so what now? Are we even gonna, there was so much uncertainty on top of me being a Black female in a predominantly white community, all those things that come along with it. And so I really appreciate you talking in detail about how you created an opportunity for yourself and for others. That's part of what We the Plug is all about as well. And then the other takeaway that really hit home for me is where you were talking about teaching others that you don't have to wait. You were saying that if you have an idea, you want to start a business, sometimes one of the greatest assets is taking a skill set that you've trained for and utilizing that as a opportunity to mentor or coach or do consultation, a combination of all of those things to help others as they rise. And then that allows you to learn so much for the idea that you may be thinking of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's huge. And I think one thing that's really important, especially for our community, is just understanding that just as much as you could sit around trying to find a perfect job for 6 months, 12 months, and you're doing odd this and odd that, you can also invest that time in yourself,
Mhm.
and investing that time in yourself will take you farther, actually, because you can actively be building something that's going to serve you for the rest of your life in some form or fashion. And then, okay, fine, you finally get the job. You can do these things simultaneously. And then eventually you're going to probably see, if you're passionate enough about what you created, you're going to see that you really want to do that full time. And when the finances allow, or you're just mentally there, you do that. And so I think it's really important. I think sharing your story is important.
Mhm.
It's a huge part of educating the youth, because a lot of times they think things aren't possible. And when they hear people that have a similar story, they're like, oh my God, there's that light bulb moment. It never gets old, because everyone thinks their situation is unique and nothing is new under the sun.
Yeah.
Every experience has already been had, and there's someone who's gotten out of it who can provide you with new perspective on how you too can also, overcome or transcend. So that's really, really important.
I love that. And I agree with you. And I think it goes back to us reminding ourselves that we have opportunities to reach out and uplift each other,
Yes.
so that we don't have the roadblocks, unnecessary roadblocks, because we're always going to have roadblocks.
Yep.
They're going to exist. But I'm a firm believer in, me doing my due diligence to share wisdom and hacks that I've been able to implement that have worked with others. Because listen, what else are we supposed to do? Like, what is the purpose of us going through something and overcoming it if not to go back and go, hey, guess what? This is what I learned. So I really appreciate that and what you all are doing. Talk a little bit about how someone can be a part of what you all are offering the program. Like, how would they go about applying, and what can they expect?
Yeah, definitely. So right now we have 3 programs. We have our flagship program, which is our 10-week summer internship program. It's called the Entrepreneurship. And that is a pretty rigorous application process. You apply, you get interviewed. We may or may not ask for recommendations. We may ask for a second interview. And then if you're accepted into the program, we help students get funding for the summer through their institution. A lot of kids don't know that they can get funding through their institution. If they're not able to, then we provide a stipend, because we don't want money to be a barrier to participation. And then it's a 10-week program. It starts with Africana history trainings from an economic lens. So we look at ancient African innovation, we look at African trade, we look at the socio-political things that were going on at the time when the transatlantic slave trade started. How did it actually start? What were our leaders doing? What were they not doing? What could they have done better? So we really analyze that history so that our kids, our youth, can start becoming start interacting with their history and start understanding that they are an extension of it. It's not just like some random thing that happened that has nothing to do with us now.
Right.
We're all still suffering because of all of that. So
Right.
at what point are we going to examine it? Because that's what we do all day when we're learning European history. We're examining it and exploring it. What did so and so do, and what was this
Right.
side doing? And so that's what we do through our program. We give them the opportunity to examine their history and say, okay, to what extent was there a lack of visionary leadership, and what type of leader do I want to be, and how do I even become a visionary leader, to know what to look at the trends and see what's happening in front of me and what decisions I need to make in order to make sure that I don't put myself, my people
Yeah.
in a really bad predicament. So it's a very intense week. We explore the diaspora as well. That's kind of like one of the first topics. What is the diaspora? Why are we all here? What does it mean to be Afro-Latino? What does it mean to be from there? We're in India. How do we get there? What's the East African slave trade? Oh my God, there was another slave trade. Oh my God, how long were we enslaved as a people, and why? So examining that stuff and getting people to understand, like, okay, we all have different experiences, but we're connected as Black people, and this is how. So we break that down, and then we get into that nitty gritty economic sort of stuff, and then we explore, we end with just that whole exploration of visionary leadership and what it really truly means. And then we get into the next part of the program, because that's laying the foundation of why it's important. It's very hard to know why you should be taking certain things seriously if you don't know why it's important. Like, why is it important for you to give back to your community? Why? Why is it important for you to understand the diaspora? Why is it important for you to be an entrepreneur as a Black person?
Right.
Why? Like, what is entrepreneurship? What's business? It's an asset. You can't take that corporate job with you. You can't pass that to your son, right? We haven't built the networks to make that possible. Now, for other communities, working corporate works very well because they got 1 million people in that network that they can pop their kids right into. We don't have that. And these are not companies that we own. So it's very important for us to own companies of substance, and so companies that are actually making impact in the world, in terms of the industry that they're in, and also in terms of philanthropy or social enterprise, we have to give back in some type of way. So we really inculcate the students with that during the last day of orientation to set the stage for the practical aspect of the program, which is them building their own business concept that has to give back in some type of way. So either it's going to be a nonprofit, or it's a social enterprise, or it's a for-profit that has a philanthropic arm. And they have to think that through to some degree, just so that they have it in the back of their minds that whatever I do also needs to serve others. And then they also do a consulting practicum for a small Black-owned business. It's supervised. So the program is very intense. It's 10 weeks of them meeting with their client through our supervision, meeting with their teams, whatever their particular project is, them meeting as a cohort, collaborating, and then them also meeting with development to build their business concept. We have our own business concept form that they fill out and we assist them with throughout the program. And then we have our weekly seminars where we continue to go through our curriculum around issues regarding wealth building or business ownership that are particular to us. Like, we talk about familial financial dependency. That's a big problem in our community. You're talking about somebody who already didn't come from much, and now their parents are expecting them to also continue helping them. How does that affect our ability to build any type of financial stability whatsoever, let alone wealth? So we really talk to them about those things and give them some tips on how to manage that, breaking those cycles. We talk about why businesses tend to fail, and why Black businesses tend to fail in particular, and so on and so forth. We talk about the legal aspect of business. And then we also talk about like what it's like to enter the job world as a Black person and things that they should be aware of, and also how to be an active worker. Like, how do you make the experience work for you? And understanding that this is not the end, it's a means to an end, but you have to be actively thinking about that. And so it's 10 weeks of that type of seminar. And then we have entrepreneurs that are specialists in whatever we talked about that day. So if we talked about why businesses tend to fail, then we'll have our chair come in. He always does this amazing workshop about the importance of legal services in business. So he does this whole, he just does this amazing workshop with them where he builds a business with them. And then he starts pointing out the legal aspects of like just even the contract to have a partnership and all the things you have to think about when you're building it with the name. And well, how'd you decide that? How much you putting in? Or, you know, it's amazing. And so we have entrepreneurs come in and do their lecture or do a workshop like that. And then at the end of the program, the students have to submit their final business concept, their final consulting report. They have to present their consulting report to the client. And then they have to also do a culminating closing ceremony where they present their whole program experience to, it used to be a big event that we would invite the public to, but now it's a private, you know, everything is virtual, which I'm fine with. And so it's an awesome program. We just closed up our last session last week. So you can see it's fresh in my emotional bank. But so the 2021 year was phenomenal. And so that is the entrepreneurship. It's intense. You know, it's like people always want it. Oh, we want that curriculum, da, 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 da. That, no, like that's when you were talking about paradigm shift. That's what I was thinking of, because I'm like, no, first of all, it's our original curriculum, which we're in the process of copywriting, but it's not for everybody. You have to be ready. You have to actually want to learn that stuff. And this is not something you just give away for free. Like, it's a rigorous application process. You have to actually want to become a visionary leader that's going to do something for your community. So that is the entrepreneurship. So just application, we usually open up in the fall. Okay. So we just finished. So by November, we'll have the new application up. For the Black Generational Wealth Workshop, or it used to just be a workshop, Black Generational Wealth Program, that is kind of when we said, how can we synthesize everything we do during that 10-week program? Like, what's the biggest thing? And that was hard, but we were like, we definitely need something that's not 10 weeks. And so, especially because that's only once a year. And so this is more of a crash course on what you need to know about employment disparity, what you need to know about what wealth is, what wealth is not, what is generational wealth, where do I stand currently? What should I be thinking about in terms of wealth? A lot of times we have a tendency to focus on the really small things about finance, and those things are there, like they're everywhere. The market is saturated. But if you don't have the right mindset, it doesn't mean anything. And so we're more so focused on the mindset. So kind of getting them to understand this is where you're trying to go, you know? And so now these are some of the steps that you can take to get there. And okay, so these are some more practical things you can do today in terms of saving. And then we also make them aware of employment disparity. And then we close off with entrepreneurship as a viable career option. We go through some activities around like how you would leverage your talents and passions to build a business concept. Now, it can end there. If students want to take it further, we would do a one-on-one with them to build out just like at least a framework of a business concept so they can kind of start to understand what that process would be like. And then we close out with another workshop where we inform them on how to incorporate a business and how do you launch a business? Like, what does that even look like in terms of website, social media, and stuff like that? And then if the funding is there, then we'll also reimburse those that go ahead and incorporate their business. So that is a Black Generational Wealth program. And lastly, we have our coaching program, which is just purely one-on-one. A lot of kids that go through the Black Generational Wealth program want to keep going with their business concept. So they'll slide into ACSC, where we'll work with them one-on-one with their business concept, or maybe they have some financial goals, or maybe they're having some issues with their higher learning experience, and they don't really have the parents to help them understand what's going on or know how to advocate for themselves. Sometimes people have different situations that may be competing with them graduating, or maybe they failed a class and they don't even know what the next step is to fix that situation so they can graduate. So we support with a whole host of things, but mainly, typically, the business one is a big one, the business concept. And then like student loans, like I don't even know what any of this means. So then we're like, okay, call your school. This is how you access it. Send us the documentation. We'll walk you through the student loans and kind of help you formulate a plan on how you're going to tackle these. So, and then just life skills as well. Sometimes they're just really scared to enter the job market. How do I be myself?
Yeah.
What is it going to be like to be the only Black person? So we help with that as well. And that's ACSC. Again, all of this, you just go online, you apply, it's all free. And yeah, that's us in a nutshell. We have an online resource center that we are revamping. So look out for that. Join our newsletter to get updates. That'll kind of be more of a self, you're in control. You can open videos, watch them, get templates regarding finance or business. So that is, and then we have our book called Understanding How to Build Black Generational Wealth as well. And that's just essentially an adaptation of our Black Generational Wealth workshop. It's just like in a book. So
the short, skinny of it. Like I said before, you all who are listening, they do a lot, and it would be in your best interest to connect with them, to plug in, to learn how you can access the resources and services that they have to offer, as well as share it within the community. So tell us the website and how they can connect with you.
Yes, so www.DIFFvelopment.org. That's DIFF as in Frank, V as in Victor, ELOPMENT. It's like development, but instead of DEV is DIFFV. And then we're on all social media platforms. And we can be reached via email at inquiry, INQUIRY @development.org. So that is us. We are here. We are ready to support. We're very hands-on and very community-oriented and very familial. So
yes,
we love what we do.
Yes, and it shows. And I really thank you for taking out the time to, like I said, deep dive into all of this. Again, you all heard her. They're opening up applications starting November of 2021, and that would set you up for 2022. Again, everything that was shared today is available online. We will put links so that you can go straight there. As we're wrapping, what would be the action plan or the action that you would, the call to action is the better way that I usually put it. For those that are listening, what's your call to action for them?
The time is always now. Life is short. Whatever you're afraid of is not worth being afraid of, to the point where you don't move. The time is always now. There's never a perfect time to do anything. If you have an idea that you're passionate about, start pursuing it, even in the smallest way. If you hate your job, start figuring out the next step. Be active about what you love. Be active about what you love and move towards it. This concept that we don't have to enjoy life or we don't have to be happy is false. We're meant to be happy. We're meant to bring joy to ourselves and others. And you doing something that you're passionate about will give you all the glory that you need to enjoy your days. So the time is always now. Don't wait.
I love that. All right. Well, that is the perfect way to wrap up this segment. Thank you again. I so appreciate your time and all the work you're doing. Again, if you all are listening to this and there's something that really hit home for you, but maybe you are not in the age bracket, maybe you are no longer in school, or you don't even have a network of young adults that you can plug into to help, still reach out, because I often tell folks that you never know if your resources such as volunteer opportunities may be of interest, or if you have funding, again, we are all donating at some point, whether it's tangible items or monetary items. So at times we find ourselves donating. It's always important for us to keep in mind organizations like this that are available to receive monetary support or volunteer support. So again, do not think that this is not for you. Dig deep and see how you can be of resource to this organization, and then reach out. Thank you all again for taking time out to listen. We hope you have a great and safe day. Take care. Bye-bye.